For being here today. We have, this is the 100 Years of American Women in Uniform program, and most of the participants are veterans. In fact, all the participants, Patria and I are not veterans, but everyone else you see before you is a veteran. So we have with us here today Major Lisa Jaster, U.S. Army Reserve. And she's come to sit down with us and talk about graduating from U.S. Army Ranger School and being one of the first 3 women to earn the coveted Ranger tab. And Major Jaster is a native of Plymouth, Wisconsin. Anybody from Wisconsin here? No? Only?
Just deployed from there.
She graduated from West Point in 2000. Any West Pointers here?
Just a few.
A few West Pointers. Was commissioned as an engineer officer and was serving in the 92nd Engineer Battalion when she deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan, OEF and OIF over 4 years, and then earned her master's degree in civil engineering from University of Missouri-Rolla. And she was then stationed in South Korea for 2 years, and in 2006, Lisa married another military officer, Lieutenant Colonel Alan Jaster, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Alan Jaster, returning to the States and leaving the Army in 2007. The two started a family, had 2 children, Zachary and Victoria, and Lisa started a civilian career as an engineer with Shell in Houston. Then rejoined the Army Reserves in 2012, and then entered Ranger Training School at age 37 in 2015. So let's just start, when I heard about you, I thought, that is some grit. That grit must come from somewhere. And so can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, your mother, your family, who influenced you?
Yeah, so from a small town in Wisconsin, very small town, and I have a mother that literally has more energy, and I think my family would agree, than any human who's ever walked this earth. So, but she had this weird saying. So she was divorced and a single mother of 2 children, and she later remarried. But during that time, being a single mother in a small Midwestern town was definitely not popular. There's no way of getting a big support system. We're talking late 70s, early 80s, and so she was fending for herself quite a bit, and she was real strict about certain things. You will keep the house immaculate. If we can't afford a new house, we'll paint the old one. If we can't afford carpet, we'll go get carpet samples and sew them together so that our house is presentable. And she just always had this crazy drive of every waking moment, you're bettering your environment. Whether it's the picture you're displaying to those around you, whether it's putting on a happy face, putting on your makeup before you leave in the morning, you're always presenting and working towards something better. And she had this saying that she would tell my brother and I when we were little, and she said, whatever you do, make sure you can never say, I should have, I could have, or I would have. And that was it. She said it nonstop. But it kind of became my decision-making process moving forward. I had 2 degrees of testing my decision-making. Number 1 is, would I regret it? Would I say I should have, I could have, or I would have? And when it's done, can I call my mom and tell her about it? Some of that was just being young, but my mom could be scary too. So I think my biggest influence, of course, is my mom. But I am very blessed in that my father was still in my life. I am definitely an equal product of the 2 of them. He is also a West Point grad, class of 1968. When he was there, he played 3 or 4 different varsity sports at various times. He was extremely active. He was, for you West Pointers, he was a star man, so he was academically gifted as well. Socially, he kind of fit some of the stereotypes. He wasn't necessarily as good at the making friends and being social, but he's very academic, he was very athletic, and he was a very driven man. So the two of them together really, you can see both of them in both myself and my mom, and my brother. And then the other thing is, I've had an opportunity to have really great male and female mentors from childhood on. In high school, at one point in time, I had lots of energy, and I had a teacher pull me to the side and was like, listen, I see you hanging out with every different social grouping, whether it's the jocks, the nerds, the burnouts, the pot smoker, everybody. You hang out with everybody equally, and he said, you have to make a decision, because you can grow up and be whatever you want, or you can grow up and be whatever society makes you. And that's when I heard for the first time that you are a cross-section of the 5 people you're closest to. So at that point in time, I'm a junior in high school, kind of trying to decide where my life is going, not living up to my potential, of course. And I started looking around at the 5 people I was closest to and said, well, do I really want to head down the path that they're heading? And that was another good mantra that I could keep with me the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. And how did you first learn of the military and that as a potential pathway forward?
Growing up in a small town in Wisconsin, everybody's dad was a Vietnam vet, everybody's uncle had some experience in the Korean War, and everybody's grandpa was in World War II. I mean, it's just, if you're not from Wisconsin, if you're from the Midwest, you know the families I'm talking about. It's kind of, every house has an American flag on the front porch, and then right next to it, it's whatever country the family's from. So my family was mostly Polish. So you had an American flag and you had Polish flags, and it was just life. Like, everybody served. The motivation to go, of course, knowing my dad went to West Point, obviously had some influence, but I never really understood that he had gone to West Point. And when I was in the 7th grade, my grandmother, who lived out here on the East Coast, went to a Harvard book sale. And I hate telling poor Carol this, but one of the class of 1980 women, her name's Carol Barkalow, had written a book called In the Men's House. And it was 99 cents at this book sale. Poor lady. So my grandma bought it and sent it to me, and it was about being a woman at West Point and in one of the first classes of women. And I read it cover to cover, and that book is one of 2 books at the time that I had read more than once. I wasn't a big reader. The other one was Stay on Your Toes, Maggie Adams. It's a book about a teenager who's a dancer. So, this was something different to me, and I'm reading this book, and I'm thinking, wow, that sounds really hard. I bet I could do that. And so in 7th grade, the engine started turning, the wheels started turning, and I decided, wow, I'm going to try this. So then I started asking my father about it, and I talked to my mom, and she said, well, you need a congressional nomination to go to that school. And I said, well, okay, how do I do that? She goes, I don't know. So at that point in time, if anything political happened within about a 30-mile radius, Mom would pack me up in the car, and we would go listen to town halls and speeches and go to where people were doing election stuff. And I didn't even know what was going on. I knew I was the only person under the age of 50 that was there. And I would try to figure out some witty 7th grade version of a political question and try to be seen, because I didn't know how else to get a nomination. Again, I was in 7th grade, and this continued moving forward, and then I thought a good way to get myself known was every year when I got my school pictures. Yes, school pictures. I would cut a couple out and send them to whoever was seated in office at the time with a letter saying I want to go to West Point. And I would get some nice form letter back from each of them saying, thank you, call us in 3 years, call us in 2 years. And finally it was, hey, call us in 1 year. And so I finally got to the point where I could interview for those congressional nominations. And one of the congressmen had been sitting for quite a while, and he had all of my school pictures. So his board, when I walked in, the lady who was asking the questions, it was 3 people on this panel interviewing for Academy nominations, and I know very little about her. I remember her wearing a blue jacket, and I thought it was crazy because I'd never seen a blue suit before. Again, small town. And I remember her looking at me and just looking at all of my photographs and the letters I had sent, and she's like, "So do you bleed red, white, and blue?" I thought that was wonderful. But the Army-Navy game was actually on at the same time, and it was a really good game. And I remember I also asked the panel if we could just quick watch the end of the game before we started the interview, and they agreed. I was a kid. I wasn't very smart.
Seems to have worked out pretty well.
It definitely worked out. I did get the nomination from his office.
And do you remember the name of the congressman?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Petri. Tom Petri.
Tom Petri. And so then you got to West Point, and what was that like? So the dream of West Point in the book, and then actually being at West Point, what was that like?
So whether you're there as a student or you're going there, you've graduated from there, you are told you are America's best and brightest. And while you're there, you realize that everybody there graduated in the top 10% of their class, was a varsity athlete, did volunteer work. You suddenly realize most of them are a lot better than you. And then you start realizing that you're all kids. Like, you all are 18 to 22. You had a couple of the older guys who did the Army first and then came to the school, but you're just kids, and you're just trying to figure your way through the world, just like any other college kid. But you don't get to do some of the activities that are growth activites. I didn't know how to rent an apartment or get water turned on during my West Point experience. So while I'm there, I think this is the world, and I think I'm America's best and brightest. But you get on site and you realize these are your peers. They're all like you. It's just normal. They're just college students too. You just wear uniforms and you have a busier day. Then you go home and you ask your college other buddies what their day looks like. It's all I ever knew. I only knew West Point. So I just thought it was normal, and I realized that everyone around me was just, they were smart, athletic, active people, but they were normal. Everybody was normal. And then I'd go home to Plymouth, Wisconsin and ask everybody what they did, and their schedules were a little different than mine. But again, it was always my normal. So going to West Point was a dream come true, and I came there very idealistic, very wide-eyed, and I realized real quick that that was the right place, and I fit there, and I didn't have to be inside the wall of the school. I was supposed to be here. So I don't know, attending the academy, it was the right decision for me, and I felt like I fit.
Any specific memories, like specific activities or classes or people that stand out for you during that time?
No. It was a whirlwind of an existence. And just yesterday, I had the pleasure of bumping into a guy I literally haven't talked to since sophomore year at school. So 1998. And about 1,000 things came back to mind of all the things we did together and the jokes we shared. And my poor husband got motor mouth Lisa the rest of the day as I told stories about, oh, when I saw this guy, and oh, we did this. And there were so many events. I think the one thing that was craziest for me, or kind of stuck out about the experience, is when you go to a school like that and it's your full life. Again, you don't feel like you're any different. You're in college with 4,000 people, and they're all living the same life, all within a 2-block radius. So it's very close existence. And then you'll go for a run, or you'll go outside of the cadet area, and suddenly you're exposed to the rest of the world. So people are taking your picture. We would hear things like, oh, there's a girl. Where? And, you're just, suddenly you're exposed to the fact that it's a different school. It's a different environment. It's a tourist attraction in New York, and people want to take pictures of the buildings and the people who live in those buildings. And again, I was just 18 to 22. I was just a college kid. I think that did stick out as a memory quite a bit is the fact that as a freshman in college, I would go for a run and people would want to take their picture with me. Not something, not normal.
Not back in Plymouth, Wisconsin.
Right,
Right.
nothing like Plymouth.
Right, so you graduated in 2000, it was almost a quarter century after the Academy admitted women, and, you know, how was it like to be a woman at West Point, or, you know, should I even be asking you that question?
There are definitely differences being a female, whether it's at Ranger School or at West Point, or I work construction in the oil and gas industry. I mean, there's not a lot of STEM women out there, but I don't really notice them. I don't notice them because I don't know any different. I've always been in this group of people. I've always run with these guys. I've always known that this is where I'm comfortable. So when things occur that identify the fact that I'm a woman, when I was first applying to West Point, people were like, yeah, but you're a woman, don't you want to go somewhere else? Don't you want to go somewhere with more opportunities for women? Those questions seemed weird to me because I never saw an issue. And while I was at the school, you get really close. You live within a 2-block radius of 4,000 people, and you've got your idiots. You've got your people that really should find a better place to land their negativity. But as a whole, you have your tight group of friends that 20 years later you see them again for the first time, and none of that matters. So I don't know what Sue and Kat went through being the first women. I respect what they did so much, and I'm really happy because I didn't have any of that to deal with. You know, after about 5 minutes, people are like, hey, if you can carry your own weight, if you're smart enough to be here, if you're willing to run next to me and carry your own load, then right on.
So then you were commissioned, and you, by the way, you were in engineering. Right?
Yes.
So what was that like to go from cadet, West Point cadet, to commissioned officer at 21, 22?
22.
22.
Mm-hmm. One of the, how many in here are officers? Okay, so you've all had that, or you've had that experience, and for those, obviously you haven't, but the commissioning source, West Point, is crazy because you literally spend every day and every night preparing to be a platoon leader. So everything you do is to do just that, is to get there. So when you take a history class at West Point, you don't take history, you take art of war. You don't take English classes, you take military writing, which I failed, by the way, just to put that out there. I'm terrible, don't ask me to write you anything. But you spend the whole time preparing to be that second lieutenant in charge of a platoon full of people. Plus I was an engineer and I branched engineers, so I had this great benefit of having a little bit of confidence because I had the academic background. I knew the guys that I would be leading knew more than me as far as application, but I had some technical capability I was coming in with, and I had 4 years of preparation to do just that, go and lead soldiers. And the most important part is, how was I going to do that? Was I going to walk in and say, well, I'm your lieutenant, I'm in charge? Or was I going to walk in and say, hey, I'm your lieutenant, I have this really nice degree, I spent 4 years prepping for this job, help me make sure I don't mess up. And I went in, obviously, I agree with that second attitude, and I had a good experience because of it.
And so you were first assigned to Fort Stewart in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then 9/11 happened about a year and 3 months after you were commissioned.
Mm-hmm.
So how did 9/11 influence your trajectory and your career? And I mean, I know it influenced everything for a lot of people in this room.
Right. Yeah, it changed the world.
Right.
The hard thing about 9/11 for me was not only, we all remember exactly where we were. Well, I was in the neuro ICU because at 10 p.m. on September 10th, one of my soldiers attempted to take his own life. He used a .22 and it lodged in his frontal lobe, and we could not find any next of kin. No parents, no brothers, no sisters. So at that point in time, I became power of attorney immediately and had to make decisions, life and death decisions, on whether they were going to try to remove the bullet, if they were going to try to save his life, because I was his platoon leader. I was 23 years old and had a 20-year-old person whose entire life was depending on me. I left that hospital room about 15 minutes before the first plane hit, got to Fort Stewart just as the second plane was hitting the second tower. So I walked in and I hadn't slept in 36 plus hours probably at that, or 24 hours at that time, and was completely stunned. And I didn't leave Fort Stewart again except to go to the hospital to visit my soldier for 3 months. And nobody did, because we were combat heavy engineers, so we had to lock off the post. We had to, all the little hunting trails and the back tank areas, we had to close off the cantonment areas. We were putting up huge berms, we were pulling security guard, and then we didn't have a lot of people that were single and lived close and were as flexible as I was. So I became the QRF commander for the installation. Myself and 15 soldiers actually slept in our company area, and we rotated on and off with 2 other groups. So every, I think, 12 hours, one of us was on, one group of 16 was on duty until we actually deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan. So yeah, it changed my life completely. I will say, in a strange way, it gave me that additional sense of purpose. I mentioned that when I arrived at West Point and actually got involved with the school, I felt like I was at home. I felt I was in the right place. When things got rough and I was dealing with my soldier and we were closing down the post and we reacted to an anthrax scare, we had to evacuate the daycare center. When I was doing all these things, that's where I felt like I fit. That's where I felt like I was needed. So not that something good came out of September 11th, but it definitely identified some things to me about who I am and kind of why I'm here.
So it was a watershed in that way personally.
Yes.
And then you said you deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So is that in 2002, or can you tell us a little bit about your deployment?
So we didn't actually deploy until the new year. Some of our unit went ahead immediately, December timeframe, and they went to Bagram. And we went to Kandahar, I believe it was in April. Might have been in February. Probably should have looked. But we went soon after the new year, and we stayed there about 9 months. My specialty at the time, I was a horizontal platoon leader. So for those of you who haven't been exposed to construction engineer units, they're called combat heavies in the Army, or at least they were in the early 2000s. Everything's changed as far as the setup. But we had one platoon that did all horizontal construction and 2 platoons that did vertical construction. So I got to say I was a horizontal platoon leader, and that made sense to people at the time. It also got a few laughs then. So I deployed and we built roads, we did the runway repair, but my key mission was I had minefield clearing operations under me. So again, I'm 23 by the time I deploy. I have 48 actual assigned troops. Then I got a squad from the Canadian Army that also did minefield clearing operations. I got a detachment of mine dogs from the German Army, and then I got what's called an aardvark. It's a mine clearing flare, and that team from a Jordanian army. So I am almost 24 at the time, and I have a company's worth of people working for me on minefield clearing operations in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And it was an important mission, but it was quite a stressful mission. Mm-hmm. it was, again, a great experience and a horrible experience all at the same time.
And then you came back, right? And then you deployed again, but to Iraq, right?
Yes.
And in 2003, 2004?
Yes, the very next year. So we came back and our equipment, some of our equipment made it back, but before it ever saw Fort Stewart, it loaded up on boat. We loaded it directly from the train station onto ships and sent it to Turkey. And for those of you who remember what was going on in Turkey, they wouldn't let us in at the time, so unfortunately I had some young soldiers who lived on a boat for a couple of months while the US and Turkish governments tried to work out whether or not we were going to be able to go into Iraq from Turkey. Instead, turned around and we came in through Kuwait. They actually kept us there because we had 92nd Engineer Battalion had deployed to Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division, stayed there for all of 101st's deployment. Then we did a handover and I was trail party with 82nd Airborne Division, so we had been there long enough, came back and then went straight over with a reserve unit to Iraq. They only kept us there 5 months. They really wanted to get us home station. We were starting to have some of those high op-tempo issues, everything from people getting physically ill to weight loss to divorces to anger and depression issues, PTSD. Some of that stuff was starting to show up in our soldiers. So our second deployment was actually abbreviated. And I was a company XO at the time, which was a really interesting job for me because now I was overseeing all the construction projects. And because I was the only degreed engineer at that time in the battalion, I did a lot of work at battalion level for all the construction projects for the 3 different companies that were there.
And so you allude to some of the difficulties with your, unit personally, or as a unit level, but what about personally for you? What was the toughest thing about your deployments?
You know, it was pre-Allen and kids, and from 7th grade, this is what I wanted to do. I can actually tell you that prior to those people right there coming into my life, the best times, my best memories are all from those deployments. I know there's hard times. I got salmonella, I got Norwalk virus, and I got them back to back, which means I basically lived as a platoon leader on project sites with an IV bag. Good thing is I've got great veins, so the medics love me, but I couldn't keep food down. But what are you gonna do? You're gonna lay in a tent where it's 106 degrees outside, 140 degrees inside. You're gonna go out to your project sites and keep going. And so I just didn't eat and would replenish however possible. We would open all the MREs. My guys were awesome, by the way. We would open all the MREs and they had shake mix, like this. It was terrible, but it was all I could keep down, so they would literally find all of the shake mixes and give them to me, just so I could keep platoon leading. And same as a XO. So I guess the worst part was that I was losing weight at a rapid pace in a non-healthy way, to say it as politely as possible. But at the same time, it was such a great opportunity because my guys really did. They must have liked me. I mean, it was kind of neat to see how they were doing stuff and how we came together as a group, seeing that I was sick, but they weren't going to let me just go sit in the med tent. So, bad memories, I don't know. Maybe it's been 10 years, so I just can't remember them. But it really was for young Lisa, it was a coming of age.
Any specific, well, how about any really good memories, like particular people that, you met, things you think about when you look back on it and you're smiling about your deployments? Well,
so one of my soldiers, and he was definitely not one of my favorites, but he wasn't a bad soldier. He was a clown, and he had no teeth. And it was because when he was a kid, he grew up in Philly in a really bad neighborhood, and he got a baseball bat to the mouth when he was very young, but he was old enough that he had his adult teeth. And that was it. So he had dentures. And of course, my guys were terrible to him because everybody knows junior military folks are are terrible to each other, and that's how we show affection. And they replaced his denture cream with various products throughout our time there. And so when I stopped drinking all the shakes, we started collecting all the shakes for him because he had no teeth. We had to wait, and we couldn't get an airplane in with supplies. First, he had to be able to contact home. Then he had to get his wife to actually send him some denture cream. Then it had to actually come in. And of course, every time we thought the plane was going to land, we were receiving incoming, the plane couldn't land. So he went like 2 weeks with no teeth. And so I, of course, was mad at my guys. So anything that was even sort of gummy that was in the MREs, which is all the good stuff. And for those of you who remember the older MREs, they had those the freeze-dried fruit that you could break apart, put in your mouth, and it like dissolved. Yeah, he got all of those, and that was like gold. So he and I ended up having a pretty good relationship because of this incident where, you know, somebody had to look out for him. While we were in theater, I promoted him to corporal. Well, we're combat heavy, which means we had all the construction stuff. And we got plywood because we had a supply yard. So we got plywood and pickets, and I had access to electricity and wiring and lots of cool stuff. My platoon didn't do it because we were horizontal, but the vertical guys had it. So we started trading stuff. And this guy, this corporal, was, he just retired on Monday. So it's very fresh in my mind because we were just talking about this. But he was kind of my bartering agent. He would go and he's like to the SF guys, hey, if you can get us a basketball, we can get you electricity. You know, and like he would do this. Well, the infantry guys came up and they were brand new. They were coming on the end of our Afghanistan deployment. This was the 82nd guys. They were new. They didn't know that you had to work through this corporal to get the engineer hookups. Well, they're like, hey, we need this, this, and this. And he goes, well, do you need or do you want? And I think he was mad because he wasn't getting the respect that he'd earned over a 9-month deployment. And this guy was, this little infantry specialist was in my corporal's face, kind of, hey, you need to do this. This is your job. And he goes, okay. My platoon leader will kick your platoon leader's ass. And that's what he said. That's what my guy said. And he's like, oh yeah? Bring him over. So of course, not knowing that any of this is going on, I get brought into the situation where my corporal's like, ma'am, you have to come here right now. I'm like, okay, you know, I'm on the radio. I had Caleb over there to make things worse. There's no Humvees left, so I backblade. I think my guy's in trouble. There's some sort of emergency. So I take a D7 dozer and drive over there backblading the whole way. I get there, jump out, and there's these 3 guys standing there, and there's 2 guys that look like they're gonna kill my guy. And he's my guy. You know, he's my kid. He's my corporal. And I get off the dozer, and he goes, get him, ma'am. Of course, the infantry lieutenant just about dies laughing, and you know we figured it out all on the side. But you know, again, the fact that this young guy, that was what he thought of me. He was going to pit me up and fight me against all the infantry lieutenants in theater.
You thought you could win.
Yeah.
Apparently.
That was before Rangers told him.
Yes. That wasn't a little bit of foreshadowing right there.
You weren't wearing your IV bag at the time.
I wasn't.
So then you returned from your second deployment and you were sent to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is where my family members who've been in the military did basic training, and they had to say a lot of great things about it. But then you went to graduate school in engineering at Rolla, right?
Yes, flip-flops and ponytails. It was awesome.
So can you tell us what it was like to come back from those deployments and then go, switch into a very different environment?
Yes. So the best way I can describe it, again, everybody here has some sort of military experience, obviously, but the best way I describe it to my non-military friends is roller skating. If you ever go roller skating, and I think they have like 3-hour sessions, or at least they did when I was a kid, you put the roller skates on and for 3 hours you roll everywhere. And then you take off the roller skates and you try to walk, and it's like you just can't figure out a way to move. And that's what it was like for me. Like, I knew that going to the classroom environment and being with people was normal. I knew this was how I was supposed to be walking, but I still was looking for that glide. It was like taking off roller skates. Yeah.
And so then, and this is where you met your now husband, Lieutenant Colonel Alan Jaster.
Yes, my much better half.
So, and I understand you met at the gym there or something?
Of course.
5 a.m., of course. How did you make time to get to know each other? And
Well, when you're in the military, it's always an abbreviated schedule.
mhm.
You're always multitasking. We were, what I thought at the time, extremely unfortunate. He was leaving for Japan right after I met him, and we were supposed to have I think 4 days of crossover. We met, and it turned out that he wasn't actually leaving for Japan for almost a month. Is that right? And so he stayed at Fort Leonard Wood for 2 weeks, and we got to know each other during those 2 weeks, and it was Easter time frame, so he tried to take me to dinner, and I was fasting. Then we tried to go out, and I couldn't eat meat because it was a Friday, and all those fun things that Catholics do during Lent. And after 2 weeks, he had to leave, so I kind of thought, well, we'll see what happens. Who knows? Right after he left, I had to write down where I wanted to go for duty stations. And I knew I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to experience the world. I loved, like I said earlier, I actually enjoyed being deployed in that sick way that people enjoy misery. And I thought, well, I'll just list every overseas location first. And somewhere, probably 5 or 6 or whatever it was South Korea. And they came up to me and they're like, if you put Korea on here, you will get Korea. If it's anywhere in your list, you will get Korea. And I kind of said, maybe I'll leave it on. Because Alan was going to Okinawa, he was going to Japan, and there's no army station base that I could have gone to at that point in Okinawa. And I thought, well, if I'm going to see where it goes, I might as well go where I can see it. And we ended up in the same time zone. And the best part about that is we were both in company command at the same time. We didn't really have time to date. So even if we were co-located, I don't know if our relationship would have lasted as well or gone as well had we been co-located. We didn't have time for each other. He had 150 plus Marines, that I think even more, that were looking up to him. I had Korean nationals and Katusas and US civilians and US military all in my command. And I didn't have any time to date either. So we had this wonderful relationship where we both knew what the other one was going through. We both understood the stresses, but we both had time crunches. So we would make phone calls, we would write pen and pencil letters, because that's what you did. He later on asked me if I could type my letters. Apparently my penmanship is really bad. And I asked him to return the favor, and we have a few of those letters left. But yeah, so it ended up being really wonderful because even though it was a compressed timeline, meaning we didn't get to spend much time together, by the time we sat down with a marriage counselor and said, hey, we're thinking about, making good on this, the counselor was like, wow, you guys have talked about more things. It was a Protestant pastor. He's like, you guys have talked about more things than I have with my wife, and we've been married 15 years. And I thought, well, it's true, because we talked about what happens if one of us dies. I mean, the things you talk about when you have a fellow military spouse, or potential spouse at the time. And so we dated for a year, got engaged, and a year later we got married, and then 9 months later, after all of that, we finally lived in the same country together. And in that almost 3-year process, we saw each other 8 times, and one of those includes a wedding. So there was a short stretch of time where he stayed with me in South Korea after we got married, but then he wasn't meant to be my FRG leader. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's the family readiness group, the person who takes all the spouse's phone calls. So he volunteered for a deployment and took a long airplane ride to get out of phone calls from our stateside spouses.
And so take us through then the next phase of your life. So you got married, then you separated from military service, had 2 wonderful children.
All right.
Two pretty good children, Zachary and Victoria, and then came to your present job working at Shell. So what was it like to transition from military to civilian life? And to life as a working mom and spouse?
So leaving the military was a really hard decision for me, but I had said it to Alan, and I still feel this way to some degree, is as dual military, I was not going to have children. Like I was willing to have children, or I was willing to be in the military, but I didn't think I could handle both, because both of them took all of me. And I knew that. So I had never thought about having children until I had met Alan. That was actually how I knew I wanted to marry him, is because one day I thought, I wonder what our kids would look like. And when that went through my head, I said something to him, because we were actually in Okinawa, and I'd said something to him, just kind of off the cuff, that displayed I might be interested in a longer term relationship than calling him my friend from the Marine Corps. And when that happened, we were driving in a monsoon. No, what are they called? A typhoon. Thank you, honey. We were driving in a typhoon in Okinawa. We were actually leaving wherever we were supposed to be staying because the weather was so bad. And he pulls over to the side of the road and just stares at me. And I'm like, oh no, I just said that out loud, didn't I? And it was the first realization that I wanted to be with this guy. But then after that, the conversations were, okay, well, I am so military. Like, I always wore my West Point ring on my wedding ring finger because I wanted to make it really obvious that my first allegiance was to the Army. And it was right about that time that I started wearing my ring on my right hand, and he got the subtle hint, obviously. And so I started thinking about having kids, and at that point in time, he and I kind of went through it, and he had decided to stay in the reserves, and I said, I can't do both. And I was so military. I was kind of one of those regulations people. I didn't think I could handle the reserve, because as an active duty person, you go see those reservists and you're like, would you put your uniform on right? Like, I just couldn't, I didn't think I could make the transition. So I got completely out. I had to walk away. I always thought I would get into the reserve, but I knew I couldn't do it straight from being tight-laced, strict, straight up and down, Captain Peplinski. I couldn't do that transition. So I got out completely, joined Shell. It was really neat because I was working for unconventionals, which means we were finding all these weird solutions for the energy crisis. And it was interesting, and it was neat work, and nobody was really good at it. So the minute I got involved, I could start using my creative brain, my deployed brain, where you're, okay, I can't find pickets, so I'm gonna go ahead and break apart that camera stand and start using that to put up C-wire. And I could use all of those great skills I got in the Army, and it was a lot of fun. Well, that only lasted a certain period of time. Shell is still great, Shell's been great to me, but they don't need creative thinking nonstop. At some point in time, they need somebody to just do the prescribed work. Well, so I lost all that fun and all that calling, and here Alan is going on his reserve duty, coming back, talking about his guys, and yeah, we played pickup game of basketball, and yeah, after we were done, everybody went to dinner together. And I know, the guys at work, they don't really want to do that with me. Nobody plays basketball with me on the rig. When I go offshore, nobody really cares that I have a family. The Army or the military as a whole is a family. Like, you meet somebody and they're like, I went to basic training, broke my leg, and couldn't be in the Army. You're like, oh, we're sisters. Yeah. Like, you spent 5 minutes in the military, we're tight. But, oil and gas or, corporate America is not like that. And I missed it. And constantly, Lisa, just go do the reserve. I said, how are we gonna do this? We've got 2 kids, we've got a house, he has his own business, I've got a career. Like, my job at Shell is not 9 to 5 job, it's a career. You sit down and talk about your 10-year plan. So I'm trying to build this career, family, my personal issues with being too dedicated to whatever is in front of me. So knowing that I don't know if I could be a good mom and a good employee and a good reservist and, oh, by the way, a good wife. I don't know I can do all these things. But literally it was serendipity. A West Point grad said, hey, we need someone. It was a female, what year is Val?
Isn't Val 95? I'm sorry, 85?
85, yeah.
85.
Yeah. So a 1985 West Point grad reached out to me via Facebook of all places, and I'd literally been on Facebook about a month, and said, hey, we have this unit, we need degreed engineers, and we think you'd be a good fit. So I called up Department of the Army, made a bunch of phone calls, and they're like, yeah, we actually completely got you out of the Army like 3 years ago. We just didn't send you anything because we didn't know where you lived. So if you want to do this Army thing, you've got to rejoin. So it took me 2 years to figure out how to get back in the Army. Literally 2 years of going to see recruiters, calling people, knocking on doors. I ended up going back to MEPS and duck walking at 30-something. After you've had 2 kids, duck walking, not the same as when you're 18. And I go through this horrible experience just so I can get back in the military. Well, the very first drill I went to with my reserve unit, we went rock climbing. And then a couple of the guys were like, hey, we're gonna go skydiving. You wanna go jump out of some airplanes? I'm like, I'm home. So that's why I got back in the reserve and the reserves in 2012. And literally I was missing something.
And so meanwhile, you were getting into CrossFit and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's an additional thing, in addition to reserves, kids, wife,
Yes.
Shell, you also have that.
So there's an underlying theme, and he's never been in the room when I answer questions before, so he's probably going to be mad at me after this, but I blame this all on my husband as well. So when we first got married, again, I had just gotten out of the military and I was missing something, so he talked me into doing a triathlon. Of course, I finished 4th in my age group in my first triathlon, which was right off the podium. And I was absolutely appalled that I was 4th and not 3rd, because I wanted a medal or a trophy or whatever. So I went knees deep. I just jumped all the way into triathlons, and I got my coaching certificate in USA Triathlon, and then I got my cycling coach's certificate and my track and field coach's certificate, and I got my distance running Roadrunners Club of America coaching certificate, because when I'm in, I'm all in. I have a personality flaw if you haven't noticed it yet. And so, Alan said do triathlons. I went all in, did some triathlons, and that's about the time when we started having children. I had Zach. I'm like, Alan, you have to promise me I can still do my physical stuff. He's like, yep, okay. So I did 2 half Ironmans, and then I got pregnant again, and I said, listen, I'm going to do a full Ironman as soon as this thing comes out of me, and that's Tori. So 13 months or 14 months, I think, after she was born, I did an Ironman, and then we had a big come to Jesus discussion of triathlon training when it's my personality is not something fun you do before and after work. It ends up being another career. And he says, why don't you try CrossFit? It's an hour a day instead of this 3-hour rubbish you're doing. Because I literally was training almost 20 hours a week. And he's like, just try CrossFit. Do it a couple days a week. I did it, and I really loved it because everybody in the CrossFit gym is type A, all in, psycho, like, the first rule of CrossFit is you must always talk about CrossFit. The second rule of CrossFit is you must always talk about your diet. I mean, this is me. These are my people, and it's a lot of former military. It's actually based off military training. A long time ago, 10 years ago, it's since moved into crazy gymnasts and stuff like that. But So CrossFit was a good fit, but I couldn't just be an athlete. I had to then be a competitive athlete. I signed up for my first CrossFit competition. It was actually before my Ironman. I had Tori with me. It turned out to be on a drill weekend for Alan. So I took my 2 children with me. I breastfed at the competition. And again, fell in love, was all in. As soon as Ironman Texas was over, I went and got my CrossFit instructor's certification, because God forbid you just train with everyone else. And I loved it. And then Alan started jiu-jitsu, and one of my other issues is I have kind of a Me Too complex. Honey, you want to go on a hunting trip with the guys? Well, I want to go too. Honey, you want to go do jiu-jitsu? Well, I want to too. So then Alan signed Zachary up for jiu-jitsu, and then Tori started getting interested in jiu-jitsu, and so I was the only one not doing jiu-jitsu. So honestly, I don't even know if I like jiu-jitsu, but if they're going to do it, I'm going to do it too. So that's how I kind of developed all of those additional interests. But we have found our family works when we're very active together. So unlike normal couples, Alan and I have gotten evening babysitters for non-work functions 3 times that I can remember. But we do get a babysitter every single morning from 5 to 8 o'clock in the morning. She comes to our house. She helps out a little bit with laundry and dishes, but gets the kids ready, makes breakfast, and Alan and I go to the gym together, and then we go to jiu-jitsu together, and that's kind of how we stay good as a family. And then the kids do their jiu-jitsu in the evenings, but they also do CrossFit workouts every morning.
Wow. So going forward to Ranger School, where we're getting to. So how did CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu help prepare you, if at all, for Ranger School?
Has anyone here ever done judo or jiu-jitsu or wrestling? Okay, all right, so you'll get this, but there is no suffering like having a person who's also trying to kill you with you on the mats. Like there is no level of competition other than looking somebody in the eye and taking them to the ground, and then they're your closest friends, but you're going to try to choke them for the next 6 minutes. Or if you can't choke them, you're going to try to break their arm or break their leg, and you don't actually go to the point of injuring them, but you like to take them as close to that point as possible. So how does jiu-jitsu impact my attitude at Ranger School? It's very easy. There's nothing worse than training jiu-jitsu. There's no pack heavy enough to be as suffocating as somebody trying to choke you. In all honesty, yep, you understand completely, don't you? And the same is true with CrossFit. CrossFit is popular because it is an entire community of people that want to test themselves daily. Every workout is a competition. Every event is trying to beat yourself or the guy next to you. And the guy next to you might be lifting a completely different weight, but you still want to be faster than him, so you can look at him and go, time! When you finish and he's still working.
So other than CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu, how did you prepare for Ranger School?
Well, the kids actually took a active role in that as well. I would do ruck marches to go pick Tori up from school, from her daycare, and then she would be part of the weight in my pack or on my pack on the way home. We did a lot of running and cycling with Zach and Tori in trailers, bike trailers. Alan had this great idea, which I didn't realize how helpful it would be, but to use like a rangefinder, and we would walk places, like we'd walk to the park with the kids, and he'd say, I bet that is 25 yards away. And we would range things everywhere we went. And while we were standing there watching the kids play, we would get me used to saying, that's 50 meters, that's 20 meters, that's 30 meters, and really understanding those distances. He also would make me, I blame him for everything. Seeing a trend here. He also had me wearing a weight vest when I got home, because he said one of the hardest things when he went to the infantry officers course as a non-traditional officer. So he was an engineer officer who later became an infantry officer, and did it at an older age, especially, you know, the Marine Corps. They're very hard on their young infantry lieutenants, and their training is extremely hard. So he had to train for it in a non-traditional way as well. So he recommended I wear a 20-pound weight vest. So from the minute I came home from work until the minute I went to bed, I wore the weight vest, and I didn't sit down unless it was to eat, to try to get my lower body used to the strains and the pressure of standing all day and having that additional weight on me. And I will tell you, as far as guys, gals, anyone at Ranger School, that was a huge difference, because people were constantly complaining about their lower legs, their leg muscles, the fatigue, or their feet. And I'm like, this is what I have to do at home. So it wasn't as big of a deal. But then the other thing is, the reserve unit I was in was a individual military augmentee drilling unit. So it was a group of individuals that actually came together once a month, and not a normal reserve. Yeah, I'm trying to describe what TPU means to everyone. Yeah, it's not a normal unit. So we were, we didn't have a weapons cage, a commo cage. We didn't have any of that stuff that you need to be familiar with if you're going to go to a school like Ranger School. Well, Alan, at that time, was a battalion commander for Marine Corps Reconnaissance Battalion. And he had kind of told some of his guys, specifically one of his active duty guys, that he has no idea how I'm going to train up for this school. And between him and his gunner, they said, well, the gunner was like, I'll come in. So on New Year's Day and a couple days after, it was supposed to be vacation days for one of his active duty guys. He was like, well, come on in and I'll help you. And so 4th Reconnaissance Battalion staff literally trained me up for Ranger School. He brought in weapons guys who taught me how to break down and put together the 240, the 249, weapons that I hadn't seen since I was a lieutenant, because I had no reason to see them. They taught me how to emplace claymore mines, which I had done, but I hadn't done in, again, 10 plus years. They taught me all this commo equipment that had completely changed since I had come off active duty in 2007. And then again, they would send me emails, hey, we're gonna go do land nav. If you want to come out with us, just let me know, you can meet us there. And it was this amazing sense of support. What I think was even better about it is, while I'm sitting there with some of these young Marines and telling them why I'm doing this, and talking to them about the opportunity, you know, this is a hard thing. These are recon Marines. These are some of the best boys in the good old boys club. And they would sit there, well, why would you even want to do this? And we would have these great one-on-one discussions that really opened my mind to why there was some resistance. And obviously these guys are training me to go to Ranger School. So they're accepting this situation, even whether or not they agreed with it. But I got to have these conversations that I knew would come up again as I'm at the school. All these same questions with, why would you want to do this? Don't you think that women aren't really built for this? I had these discussions while I was prepping for the school, and I got to hear their point of view, and I got it. Like it's one thing when you read it. You go online and you can read some of the comments about me and my sisters who went through the school, and there's some horrible things that have been said about us or about the idea of us. But if I take it back to those young Marines who were sitting there, or some of the young infantrymen that I talked to prior to going to Ranger School, it makes sense. Like, it sounds horrible and tight, but it sounds horrible just like if you get in an argument with your spouse over text, everything sounds terrible. Once you sit with a young man and he's like, listen, this is how infantry life is, and I don't really want a female there. I get it. I'm not offended by him saying that, because I understand where he's coming from. That was probably some of the best preparation, besides the 249, besides running and rucking. That was the best preparation, because mentally I knew exactly where those young men were coming from, and I really appreciate their intestinal fortitude that it took to look at somebody, a major, and say, I don't want you going because I worry about you too much. If we deployed together, I would protect you, and I don't need to be protecting my comrade. So I got a lot of help from, of course, I went home.
So then you arrive, so the day, take us to the day you arrive at Fort Benning, Georgia for Ranger School. It's part of a group of 400, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about what it was like that first day you arrived, your very first day of Ranger School?
So I'm lucky when I get nervous, I can eat without a problem. So I ordered a taxi the night before, made sure they picked me up at the hotel, and had the taxi go to Subway so I could eat as much as physically possible before I showed up, and I got a 12-inch sub and inhaled it in the 8-minute drive. The taxi driver had a full-size van, and Ranger School report date is a very, very good day for Ranger Cab. And Ranger Cab stopped by another hotel, and 2 other Ranger students jumped into his minivan and looked at me and said, no, we can't go with her. And the cab driver was like, she's one of the first women. No, we're going to Ranger School. He's like, I know, so is she. No, we're going to Ranger School. And this went on for a good 3 or 4 minutes. They wouldn't get all the way into the cab because they couldn't comprehend that I was going with them. And again, that interpersonal relationship, the importance of that, came to light in this moment because, of course, neither of them had eaten in 2 days because they were nervous. They were just kids. And so I'm breaking off some of my sandwich and giving them to them because I'm a mom and they're babies and I had to take care of them. And they're like, you're really going? I'm like, yes, eat. They're like, no, I'm too nervous, I'll throw up. I'm like, well, you're not going to eat again for another 24 hours, so you might as well eat now. So I'm feeding my new children, and we get dropped off, and of course one of them, he's got all of his rank and stuff still on, and we're trying to, they don't have their camelbacks full of water, and it's as if they just needed me. They needed a mommy right there and then. So I mothered these 2, and we all came into Ranger School together carrying our bags. And as soon as we reported to the front line, they say, grab your paperwork and go in this line, and you do this in-processing, which takes all of the first day. As soon as I get there, one of the Ranger instructors looked at me and said, you're a female, you have to go and get a pregnancy test. So they were giving all the women pregnancy tests as soon as they arrived, which made sense. Well, these 2 guys lost their place in line, dropped their paperwork, and followed me. So I'm running. I'm running to the aid station, and they're following me. And I'm like, guys, you're supposed to report. They're like, we're not leaving you alone. And literally for the rest of in-processing, they made sure I had a Ranger buddy because they were worried that as a female showing up by myself, I wouldn't have a buddy. So in that little 8-minute drive, these 2 guys went from, hell no, am I getting in a cab with her, to we will not leave you alone. And they didn't. Unfortunately, it was a bunch of shaved head guys. I have no idea. I never saw them again. I don't know if they succeeded or failed. So I feel terrible about it, but I met 400 people that day, and I don't remember one of them.
So Ranger School is open to all ranks and branches of the military. So can you tell us about some of the people, other than these 2 guys, who went through the different phases with you?
There's an interesting dynamic at 37. So to go to Ranger School at 37, male or female, you have to get a second physical. Everybody has to get the Ranger physical, and then I had to get the old lady physical, which, by the way, was the old man physical, and they had some inspections that I didn't really know how I was going to complete. So we kind of had to fluff that. So at 37, you're really old. 22, 23 is the average age, and so when I reported, most of my teammates, my Ranger buddies, had 0 life experience, but they also had a different mental image. So being knocked down when you're 18 to 22, 23 years old hurts a lot more than when you're 37. Because I could look around and say, worst case scenario, you send me home to my wonderful husband and children and great job. You know, you got an 18-year-old, 19-year-old who, he fails Ranger school, he gets kicked out of the Ranger Battalion, he has to live with that the rest of his infantry life and will have to come back here anyways and go through the suck all over again, for lack of a better way of saying it. So they're looking at it differently, but they also don't have that well to dig into. I had one guy, and he was quite belligerent, but he was a sweet kid. And of course, we all have shaved heads. I had to keep a 1/4 inch of hair. The rule has since changed, but at that time, the Army regulation said a shaved head on a woman is considered a trendy haircut, so I couldn't shave my head. So us women stuck out because we had a 1/4 inch of hair. Like, that mattered. But when this young man's, I'm trying really hard not to use his name, but when this young man, and he and I ended up having to co-locate a few times. I was the 240 gunner, and he'd be my assistant gunner, and then the next day he'd have the 240, and I would have all the additional equipment, the spare barrel, etc. So we ended up being next to each other in a lot of fighting positions. And so by the 2nd or 3rd day that we're together nonstop, we really start talking. Again, he's kind of belligerent, and at one point in time I said, "You see that duffel bag? That duffel bag is older than you, so I don't want to hear anything out of your mouth." Like, literally, my duffel bag was 20 years old and he was 19. Well, when his hair started growing back in, it turns out not only is it red, but it's Zach's red. Like, it is the same color as my son's hair. And so everybody thought that was kind of amusing. That now, when you're out there, you're sleeping, a full night's sleep is either 45 minutes to 2 hours, somewhere in that range. And some nights we walked till dawn. It means you sat down, ate your dinner, ate your breakfast, and started your next day. And that was literally your rest period. So we're on, I think, the 3rd day of this, and he cannot stay awake during guard duty. And you're all supposed to be awake at this time, but we're doing the whole thing. You sleep, wake me up if somebody comes by, I'll wake you up if somebody comes by, vice versa. I'll sleep while you keep guard. Well, this guy, he's, like I said, 19, with the metabolism of a 19-year-old, sleep deprived. There was no way he was staying awake. So finally I'm like, "Dude, you have got to wake up." Because, "Yes, Mom, I'm coming." And he literally jumps up. And so apparently he still lives with his mother. And I became Mama Jaster for the rest of my time in Ranger School. But yeah, so he looked just like my kid and called me Mom, and that was the end.
So the school is 61 days if you don't recycle at all, and then recycle each phase, it's what, 180 days? Something like that?
Well, if you do the first phase 3 times, get stuck there over the 3-week summer break, and then you recycle the 2nd phase and the 3rd phase, yes.
And so it includes the week of Ranger Assessment phase, RAP, and then 3 phases, Darby, Mountain, and Swamp. So maybe can you take us through each of these phases?
So, the easiest version. RAP is the ACTs for college. It's just a standardized test. Everybody has to take it. It's all individual. If you can't pass it, you can't come to school. That's all it is. It's just a very physical version. And it's a bit of a gut check. The first day of RAP week is the physical fitness test. You show up on day 0. You do all that paperwork processing I mentioned earlier. You go to sleep. They wake you up at anywhere between 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on how hot it is, and you take a physical fitness test. 25% of the class does not make it to breakfast on the first day. So all these guys shaved their heads, spent $2,000 in buying gear, showed up, said goodbye to their loved ones, and don't make it to breakfast. That portion of the school is 4 days long, and it's nonstop every day. You do get 3 meals a day, but it is nonstop all day, every day. So if you're not doing training, you're standing in line doing air squats, or holding your duffel bag over your head and squatting, or picking your duffel bag up off the ground and putting it down as fast as you can and getting yelled at the whole time. It's all very fun, it's good for the soul. You make it through that last day, which is a road march, and when you cross the finish line on the 12-mile road march and you cross under time, boom, you've made it to Darby. Darby phase is the crawl phase. Think of them as crawl, walk, run. And the crawl phase is they teach you how to work at small team level, squads of 13, 14, up to 18 people, men. Then, and that's done in Georgia. It's a learning phase, but that's where the most people recycle. I got to experience it 3 times, so if you have any questions, I am an expert. The next phase is mountains. Mountains is by far the hardest phase because the mountains are huge and they're cold all year round and there's lightning strikes and it's raining and the weather is terrible and the packs are heavy and you have to carry ropes, and it's definitely by far the hardest phase physically and mentally, because not only do you have to walk all day and complete these missions, but there's no flat ground. There's no road to walk on. And on top of that, you have the largest snakes Georgia has to offer. Of course, you also have ground nesting bees. So if you don't kneel on a snake, at some point in time, you will kneel, sit on, or drop your pack on a bee's nest. There was actually one day where I got stung in the face a bunch of times, and it was the first time I had sat down in well over a day, as far as I can remember. And I just got in my sleeping bag and pulled my sleeping bag all the way over my face and decided to sleep in the bee's nest because I didn't feel like moving. So that's the walk phase, and the level of misery is undescribable. And then the run phase is swamps, and again, in that really sick military way, swamps was fun. It wasn't fun to do twice, but it was fun. It's where everything comes together, you know what you're doing, you know your guys, you have this air about you because you made it this far. It's an 85% first time go rate, 98% pass rate, like less than 2% fail this. There's no way I'm gonna fail this, I'm gonna make it through. But the packs are still heavy, but you go through the water and you float and you do different kinds of missions where you go through the swamps. Sounds awful, kind of fun. And you have these crazy missions that are real. They have an island, and every year, or every ranger class attacks this island, and there's buildings, and they have things set up, and they have people playing bad guys, and it's fun. Again, in that sick way that it can be fun. And swamps, the run phase was extra fun for me because a guy who I recycled with in Darby, who was there for that 3-week summer break when we were doing just a lot of recovery. We weren't actually in training, but we were still stuck at the school. He was in my bay with me. Well, he was one of the Op 4. He was one of the bad guys in swamps. So I got to kill him on several missions, and that was wonderful. He wasn't my favorite.
So any other memories that stand out of Ranger School?
You know, there was a moment of acceptance. So one of the questions I get asked the most is why do you go? Why did you go? And I can tell you why I went and how my husband talked me into it. But once I arrived there, what was going through my mind, it started off where, you know, I wanted to prove that gender shouldn't matter. If I can carry the load, then I should be able to go to this school. So for me personally, I was never out speaking that women need to be in the infantry or armor or anything else. I never even thought about gender integration on that level. I actually avoided that conversation because I wasn't sure what my opinion was. Hearing the opinions of these young Marines and some of my infantry peers and the guys who worked for my husband, I kind of got why it was all male. So I never wanted to fight that fight because I didn't know what my position was. But I, as an engineer officer, couldn't go to Ranger School, but my male peers, who I was trying to get promoted with, who I was fighting for jobs against, they could go to Ranger School. So my argument had been, well, if a male engineer can go to Ranger School or any other school, and Ranger School is considered the premier leadership school of the US Army, and people come from different countries to go, well, why the hell can't I go? You know, it just doesn't make sense to me. So my reason for going to Ranger School was, I want to do, me too. I want to do what all the guys can do. Why not? You know, if my husband's going to do jujitsu, if my engineer buddies are going to go to Ranger School, I want to do it too. So that's what I went in there thinking. And then at some point in time, it was hard to describe that in an elevator speech. There's no 30-second version of that discussion. So it was easier to say, and still true, to say that whether it's my son or my daughter in the military someday, I want them to have the best trained person to their left and right, regardless of gender. And so that kind of became my mantra is, I want, if my husband deploys, if I deploy, I want the best trained person, period. So that kind of became my discussion point. And then I got recycled for a third time at Darby. And they told me that I would restart Ranger School one day after I was supposed to graduate. And I called Alan and said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stay. And he said, what do you think is going to be different about this? Do you think there's any chance that you'll be able to move on? And my response to him was, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever leave Fort Benning. But I do know that I've met 800 young men whose opinions have changed. So one of these memories is at the end of a road march. The route march is 12 miles long. It's not a terribly heavy pack. It's not a terribly hard course. But it's exhausting at the end of 4 days when you haven't slept and you haven't been eating right, and honestly, you're a little older, so you're a little more sore than those 20-year-olds. And I finished my second 12-mile road march in the top 20-25% of the pack. So I actually did better my second road march than I did on my first. And at the end, they have these, they're like 55-gallon drums cut in half, and the ranger instructors stick ice blocks in there and water, and it's to help you cool down your core temperature so that they reduce the chance of heat casualties. So when you're done road marching, you're supposed to take your arms and put them in this 55-gallon drum and just soak there for a second. And I was exhausted. I had literally gone to my limit. I was chanting to myself, knowing that I couldn't go home without the tab at this point, or at least I couldn't go home knowing that I didn't give it my all. And my chant to myself, and sorry kids, you're gonna hear this, was I cut my hair for the ship. Like every couple of steps, I just kept chanting that because I didn't want to go back to my job at Shell with a buzzed haircut and nothing to show for it. I have a really ugly head. Like, I have scars. I mean, I got a little gray spot. Like, I have an ugly head. I had to have something to show for it. So I put everything into this road march, and in my personal opinion, I gave it a little too much because, you know, I finished in the head of the pack, but I didn't need to put that much in. I probably could have saved a little more for later. So I'm exhausted. I actually stick my head in this water, and it is truly nasty. I mean, you think about what has been in this water by this point in time, and it is disgusting. But I put my head in that water and was just stuck in there like an ostrich with his head in the ground. And this guy comes up to me, and I called him King James throughout our Ranger School class. And King James comes up behind me, and he's an SF medic, I think, E5, just, you know, hard as hell, just a go-to-it type guy. And he whispers, he leans over and whispers to me, and he's like, I'm sorry. And he apologized, and I gave him that, what is wrong with you, dude? Look. But then I realized he had been, for 9 weeks, I had been at Fort Benning. And everybody else in the world had been talking about us at Fort Benning and making all these comments and making all these statements. So King James comes up to me and says, I'm sorry for all the things I said about you. I'm sorry for all the things I said and did to make your life harder, even though I had no idea who you were. And so that incident was my favorite memory at Ranger School because that was a complete verbalization of why I was there. It was the best example. Because King James someday might be the next sergeant major of the Army. I don't know. But there was no way he was going to believe that women could do what he did until I beat him on a ruck march. So I guess that's one of my favorite moments.
You might have already answered this in what you just told us, but there was this Washington Post interview where you talked about how you started out and you were a unicorn, and then you stopped being a unicorn, and you became the other guy's battle buddy,
Right.
and the ranger buddy. And so can you tell us about how that happened? How you went from this unicorn
Right.
to just their battle buddy?
I think whether it's integration or it's political debate or any controversial topic, words don't seem to get us there. Like, we can throw facts, we can throw figures, we can discuss, and we're academics, and I would like to say we've risen above just behaviors, but we haven't. People need proof. They need to see it. And the best thing that I learned while I was there, and incidents like the King James story taught me, is I can change anybody's mind about women in the military or women in combat or women at ranger school if I can sit in front of them. But until you sit with somebody who disagrees with you or doesn't understand you, and you really walk in their shoes, or better yet, walk side by side with them, those barriers will never be broken. And so for Ranger School, the development from unicorn to Ranger Buddy was, hey dude, I see you're exhausted, I'll take your shift. You'll have to, give me some of your MRE tomorrow, but I'll take your guard shift. Or, working with people and truly, for lack of a better phrase, but in this city it's an appropriate one, crossing the aisle. Like, shut up, listen, show yourself, be that person, be the change you seek. That's exactly what it was. It was just, okay, I can't tell you that I belong here, so I'll show you. You're tired, give me your rifle. You're hungry, here, you can have my salt pack to help you through the night. Or I'll give you my drink mix, or here's some of my extra water. Or, hey, today I can't handle it. Some days it was me saying I need help. And that was just as important to these guys as helping them. Because at some point in time, I was not going to let anybody ever help me because I was the woman there and I had to prove myself. Well, guess what? When that put me in this category of you're not a normal woman, or you're not a normal person. Everybody needs help sometime at Ranger School. So when I allowed them to see my weaknesses as well, then I became their battle buddy. Then I knew their weaknesses, they knew mine, and nobody outside that school will ever know that we had these exchanges, that we had these tears, that we had these moments. That's really what happened.
Is there anything you miss about ranger training?
The interesting thing about any military event, whether it's a deployment or a school, is you get to be all in. So, no, I have no desire to go back there. But being able to be completely focused, Alan told me when I got in the cab to leave for Ranger School, he goes, the minute you walk out of this door, you stop being Lisa, you stop being my wife, you stop being a mother. You have to be Major Jaster. And obviously I have the support team that allows me to do that, and not everybody does, so I definitely understand that. But by being allowed to do that and allowing myself to do that, Ranger School got to be something where it was fun to be in swamps. It was fun to run around and kill the bad guys, and every once in a while get killed, because I got to be all in. And I miss having a singular focused life at times. It's nice to be able to have one thing, one goal that you're really striving for.
Right. right, so I have one more question, then I want to open it up for questions. And I'm conscious this is a question that fathers probably don't get, but how did Ranger training affect you at all as a parent? What was it like to come back home to being mom and a spouse?
So I like you started that question by saying dads don't get this, because the one thing I found being in a foxhole with guys that were parents is they want to be asked as much as we do. So it's something I actually try to talk about a lot when I talk about diversity, whether it's in corporate America or in the military, is dads love their kids. So in Shell, we have a bad habit of, I used to work offshore, and somebody would come up to me, they're like, oh, you don't have kids yet, do you want to go? Or, oh, you have kids, Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and send Eric. Eric, can you stay late? Because Lisa has to get home to her kids. Well, Eric has 3 kids. And guess what? Eric wants to see his kids too. And the realization I came to while I was there is listening to these guys, it's not socially acceptable for a guy to say, God, I miss my kids. But every one of them had a picture of, a lot of them had pregnant wives. They had their ultrasounds that they carried with them everywhere. They had pictures of their children. They had pictures of their wives. It helped me because when I came home, my guilt was a little reduced, because Alan has an excellent relationship with his children, with our children, that he might not have developed without 6 months of being a sole parent, because as a mother, I feel obligated to take those roles. As a mother, when the kids get sick, I feel like I have to be the person who rushes to pick them up from school. But he had to do that, but we figured out as a couple that he was getting to do that. And what we take away from our male soldiers is the right to have those same feelings towards their families, missing their wives, missing their children. And it was a great lesson learned for me. But I mean, it's hard to reintegrate into the family, but I think it's just as hard for my male counterparts as it was for me.